The sound of crying came from the staff room, raspy, faint, as if someone's heart was breaking into pieces. It echoed off cold white walls, fell onto a tiled floor stained with cleaning water. A name tag lay tilted on the ground. The silver letters faded with time. Maya Rivera. Mason Reed stood still. His hand trembled as he picked it up. Cold water soaked his fingertips. But what made him shiver wasn't the chill. It was the familiar weight of silence that had been hidden too long. He took a slow breath, looked around the store. Fluorescent light, cold as ice. Long aisles are empty of voices. No one recognized him. No one knew that the man in the old jacket and cap was the founder of the very place they worked. He could hear everything. The drip of a leaking pipe. The ceiling fan is turning slowly. And the muffled sobs behind the closed door. His voice broke the stillness, barely above a whisper. If this is happening in my store, what else have I missed? The words fell into the void. But their echo did not fade. They lingered in the air, heavy with confession and warning. Mason tightened his grip on the tag, eyes fixed on that half-closed door where the crying continued. Something inside him began to crack. He knew. Everything he once believed about this company, about people, was about to be tested. Then came the voiceover, low, steady, and calm. Stay till the end. What happens here will change how you see leadership forever. A pause, a breath. Before we start, if you believe every worker deserves dignity, hit subscribe. His tone softened, almost intimate. This channel tells the stories most CEOs are too afraid to face. Silence drifted through the space. Only breath, voice, and the feeling that somewhere, behind a closed door, truth was waiting to be heard. Some mornings begin with sunlight, and some begin with tears. Mason Reed once believed his company was the safest place to work, an empire built on promises of trust, respect, and unbreakable values. But that sound, that hoarse cry behind a cold door, shattered every belief in an instant. He had signed hundreds of reports, read countless evaluations, all perfect, and yet in a single morning, he learned perfection can be built on fear. Numbers can look beautiful, but they can't hide real tears. From that moment, Mason knew he had to go down to the place reports could never reach, where sighs, whispers, and tears told the real story of his company. He didn't know where that cry would lead him, only that if he didn't stop to listen, he would never again deserve to call himself a leader. Water dripped onto the glossy tiles. Cold light from the fluorescent lamp trembled across the floor. Mason stood still before the restroom door. Behind it came quiet sobs, pulling the silence apart. He tapped lightly on the thin wood, voice low and calm. "Are you okay in there?" A pause, the sound of paper rustling, a shaky breath. I'm fine. Just need a minute." But Mason knew. No one's fine when their voice shakes like that. The door cracked open, and she stepped out. A small woman with red, swollen eyes, a silver name tag glimmering faintly on her chest. Maya Rivera. Her dark uniform was wrinkled, hands dry and cracked from cleaning chemicals, fingers trembling as she pinned the tag back in place. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't stay here long. I need to get back." Her voice was thin, stretched between fear and exhaustion. Mason saw something behind those eyes, not just tears, but despair swallowed by silence for far too long. He spoke softly, almost afraid to disturb the air. "My name's Mike. First day on the job." Maya looked up, confused, measuring if he could be trusted. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. Her hands dropped. "Everything's falling apart." The words fell softly, but hit like stone. "My daughter, Sophia, needs heart surgery. I've waited 3 months for insurance approval. Now they say I don't have enough hours to qualify." Mason froze. He knew the company policy. He had signed it himself. But the woman before him was describing another company entirely, a darker one, where rules had become tools of control and punishment. She stared down at her shoes, eyes cloudy with tears that hadn't fallen yet. "I've worked here 3 years. Never late, never missed a shift, but now they cut my hours whenever they want." She pointed toward the notice board near the door. Mason walked closer. The light reflected on the glass. Names crossed out, replaced in red ink, shifts shortened to fragments. Some weeks, 20 hours, some 15. Impossible to plan, impossible to survive. Mr. Kane said it's company policy. I don't understand. The store's always busy. We're always short-staffed. Her words pierced Mason's chest. He knew every rule, every guideline in the system. And this wasn't one of them. Someone was exploiting the gaps. And Maya was paying the price. He tried to keep his tone steady. Maybe it's just temporary adjustments. But even he didn't believe himself. Maya shook her head, voice distant. "No." I asked. "They said if I don't like it, I can leave. Dozens are waiting to take my job." Mason felt his heartbeat slow, trapped inside his chest. He forced a weak smile. "I understand. It must be hard." Maya nodded slightly, wiping her eyes with rough hands. "I just need to keep this job a little longer, at least until Sophia gets her surgery." Her voice faded. Only shallow breaths remained. Mason looked at those cracked hands, at the sleepless face before him. He wanted to tell her who he was, to say she deserved better, but he couldn't. Not yet. From the hallway came heavy footsteps, leather shoes clicking hard, a man's cold voice echoing. Maya stiffened, back straight, eyes wide. A man walked past, barely glancing at them. She stepped back, whispering fast. "Don't let him see you talking to me. He hates when employees talk during shifts." Mason nodded slightly, watching the man disappear around the corner. The name on his badge gleamed under the light. Victor Kane. A chill ran down Mason's spine. When the hall fell silent again, Maya exhaled softly. "I should get back to work." She bowed her head, pushed the mop cart forward. Wheels squeaked across the floor. Mason stayed there, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat, and the question with no answer. A new voice broke the quiet behind him. Younger, quicker. "You're new, right?" Mason turned. An Asian guy leaned against the wall in a light blue uniform. "Tommy Park," he said, offering his hand. Mason shook it, nodded. Tommy glanced around, then spoke low. "Don't ask questions here. Kane doesn't like talkers." Mason frowned. Kane. That was him, right? Tommy smirked. "Yeah, the boss. He's the reason everyone keeps their head down." Silence stretched thick. Mason turned toward the end of the hallway. Maya was there, crouched low, wiping the floor in that pale light. Small, almost disappears into her own shadow. He took a deep breath. Something stirred inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years. Anger, mixed with shame. She said, "Corporate approved it." Corporate meant him. Mason Reed. The very man they believed was part of this cruelty. A skipped heartbeat. And he understood. Something was deeply wrong inside the house he built. And if this was only the beginning, whatever waited beyond that door could be far darker still. That voice cut through the air like a blade, cold and sharp enough to make anyone step back. "Rivera, floor's still dirty." Victor Kane walked out of his office with a half smile. Not joy, just disdain. Maya flinched, bowed lower. Her hands gripped the mop tighter, pressing it against an already spotless floor. She said nothing, only nodded, as if scrubbing away her own fear. Mason stood nearby, pretending to restock shelves, watching every small trembling movement. He saw the sweat drip, mix with the cleaning water, and get crushed under Victor's shoe without a second thought. "I asked you to clean this an hour ago," Victor said, his voice drawn out for everyone to hear. "You still don't know how to do your job," Maya answered softly, voice trembling. "I'm sorry, the floor is clean. I just—" "Don't argue." He cut her off, and smile thinning, eyes flicking from Mason back to her. "You think sorry pays the bills?" Maya's hands shook. He pulled out his phone, typing casually on the timekeeping app. His tone was flat, like reading the weather. "I'm docking 1 hour off your shift. Maybe that'll remind you to move faster. 1 hour's pay. For someone like Maya, that was a meal for her child, a pill she couldn't buy. Mason's throat tightened. The floor was so clean he could see their reflections, proof that she'd done nothing wrong. But Victor still stood there, hands in pockets, satisfied. "Next time," he said slowly, "try working instead of feeling sorry for yourself." The words landed like a slap. Maya bowed lower, didn't speak, just nodded, and kept mopping. Tommy Park stood by the shelf, pretending to rearrange products, but anger burned behind his eyes. He leaned closer, whispering low enough for Mason alone. "He does it to everyone. Single moms, immigrants, people who can't quit." Mason turned to him, saw exhaustion in his face. "He knows who's desperate," Tommy murmured. "That's how he keeps control." Silence thickened. Victor looked their way, sensing something. "You two done whispering?" His fake smile returned, eyes sharp as glass. "If you've got time to talk, you've got time to work." Tommy lowered his head. Mason pressed his lips tight, holding back each breath, each rising wave of fury. He knew one wrong word now, and everything he was trying to uncover would vanish. But something inside him, the part that still believed in justice, began to burn. His hand slipped into his shirt pocket. A light swipe. The recording app opened silently. No music, no intro, just his breathing. And Victor's footsteps on the tile, each step an accusation. "People like her," Victor hissed, "should be grateful for crumbs." The words came out clear, cruel, almost proud. Maya stood still, head bowed, but Mason saw her shoulders tremble. Victor turned, whistling as he walked back into his office. The door closed. Silence returned, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy stillness before a storm. Maya kept mopping, hands rough and tired, sliding down the handle, as if stopping would break her completely. Tommy walked away, head low, steps heavy. Mason stayed, alone under the cold light. Phone still recording. He replayed the first few seconds. Victor's voice cut through the speaker, each word a blade. "People like her should be grateful for crumbs." He stopped the recording, slipped the phone back into his pocket, took a deep breath. Cold ran down his spine, but something hot rose inside him. Not anger, shame, because that man represented a company that bore his name, a company once built on trust and ethics, now twisted into a place where the weak were broken to polish profit reports. Mason looked at the floor. His reflection and Maya's blurred together, two worlds bound by the same shadow. He whispered to himself, so quietly only the air could hear, "No one should be grateful for crumbs." A weight pressed on his chest. Then he lifted his head. The white light still glared above, but in his eyes everything had changed. He knew this was only the surface. Behind Victor Kane's cold smile lay something deeper, darker, and Mason would have to go further, into the place where power and guilt collide. Behind that mask, truth was waiting to be exposed. The cheap motel room glowed in the dull yellow light of an old desk lamp. Mason sat before his laptop screen, his face still in the flickering glow. Numbers glared back at him on the report. Labor costs down 23%. He read it a third time, still not believing it. The numbers were written to praise efficiency. But now, every word felt like an accusation. His inner voice came slow, cold, heavy with shame. A 23% drop in labor cost means someone lost 23% of their life. Every chart, every figure carried the scent of something rotten, something he hadn't seen, because he'd spent too long seeing the world through numbers. Mason leaned back in his chair, eyes on the ceiling. A small crack ran across the plaster, like a line dividing two worlds. Then his father's voice returned, steady, deep, echoing from years ago. "A company isn't strong if it breaks its weakest." He remembered hearing it as a boy, sitting in the corner of his father's workshop, watching him wipe oil from a machine by hand. Now he sat inside an empire he had built himself. And that one sentence felt louder than any advice he'd ever paid for. He took a deep breath, his hand trembling slightly. He opened a new file and began to type. One word at a time. Name, Mike Henderson. He paused, then typed again. Age, 37. Former construction worker. No family, no savings. Desperate for work. Simple words, yet each one was a step away from glass and gold. A step away from the safety of being the boss. He looked at the name again. Mike Henderson, an ordinary man, no title, no power, no voice. He smiled faintly. Perfect. Mason stood and walked to the small mirror by the desk. The reflection showed a tired man, one who'd led thousands but never truly stood beside them. He loosened his tie, took off his watch, removed the white shirt, replaced it with a faded thrift store one. He lowered his voice, tried speaking like a man who'd lost everything. I can work any shift, any hours you need. The first try trembled. He tried again. Slower, rougher. I just need a chance, sir. This time, it sounded real. He stared longer at his reflection. No longer Mason Reed, CEO of a billion-dollar company. Just Mike Henderson, a man clinging to a $12 an hour job. He stood still, listening to his own breathing change, slower, heavier, like the rhythm of those who carry the weight of survival every day. Then an old memory flickered in his mind. Like a film rewound, he was a boy again, standing in a cold warehouse, watching his mother pack her things. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. I'm fine. Sweetheart. They just don't like people who ask questions. He hadn't understood why she was fired, only remembered her holding an empty lunchbox and smiling weakly. There will always be someone weaker, Mason. If you can, stand with them. The image froze on her hands, rough and cracked, just like Maya's. When the memory faded, Mason was still staring at the mirror, eyes full of shame. His mother lost her job for doing what was right, and he had let hundreds be exploited in the name of efficiency. He exhaled slowly, closed his eyes. In his mind came Maya's cry, Victor's cruel laugh, and his parents' voices merging into one. You can make it right, if you're willing to start from the ground. Mason opened his eyes. No hesitation left, only resolve. He nodded once, whispered like a vow. Tomorrow, I go in. Outside, the wind slipped through the window crack, carrying the chill of night. He closed the laptop, walked toward the window. The city lights still glittered, beautiful, distant, hollow. He saw moving shadows below, bent figures rushing through the cold. So many Mayas holding on to the last thread of hope. He clenched his fist, felt the cold bite his skin, and whispered, I built a company that forgot its soul. The wind carried the words away, but something stayed behind. A new resolve, born from shame and clarity. By morning, Mason Reed would be gone. Only Mike Henderson would remain. A man about to walk into the depths of the system he created, to find the heart it had lost. Mason returned to the store that night. No tailored suit, no polished shoes, just a faded shirt, jeans frayed at the cuffs. No one recognized him. No one's eyes lingered for more than a second, only the smell of bleach and the low hum of the air conditioner blending with the chill of the night. Maya was mopping the front aisle, hair tied in a loose knot, her face thinner than before. When she saw him, she stopped. Surprise flickered across her tired eyes. You came back, Mason smiled faintly, his voice rough but calm. Told you, I needed this job. She watched him for a second longer, then nodded. Good. We can use the help. They worked in silence. The sound of the mops sliding across the tiles felt like time slowing down. Each streak of water, each dull reflection, marked another day that refused to end. Mason bent over the bucket, saw the gray swirl of dust and soap merging into something heavy. The smell of bleach stung his nose. Maya, he asked quietly, why's this same water used for the toilets and the break room? She glanced around, lowering her voice. He cut the supply budget, said we're using too much. She lifted the nearly empty bottle of cleaner. This has to last the whole week. Mason said nothing. He knew the real budget was 10 times that number. He knew, because he'd once signed it himself. Now he was seeing how people like her had been forced to choose between hygiene and safety because someone was stealing from them. The clock hands crawled past 11. Only the vent fan still made a sound. Maya cleaned the aisles. Mason changed trash bags. Then the office door burst open. Victor Kane stepped out. Cheap cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. Santos. His voice cracked the silence like a whip. Maya turned. "Yes, Mr. Kane. You're too slow." "Docking 30 minutes. He raised his phone, tapped a few keys. Didn't even look at her. "But I've been—" Her words froze under his warning glare. "Next time. Finish on time." He drew out each word, then walked off, leaving behind smoke and suffocating silence. Mason looked at her. She stood motionless for a few seconds, then bent down again, mopping without expression. $6 gone. $6. 3 meals for Sophia. Medicine she couldn't buy. Sweat and pain from a night erased with one gesture. Mason clenched his fists. He wanted to speak, to throw the question in Victor's face. But he couldn't. Not yet. He had to see everything first. Victor wanted them afraid. And Mason couldn't let him sense that he wasn't. The air thickened. Every stroke of the broom sounded like someone swallowing anger. Maya kept working. Precise, steady, no defiance, no hurry. But her hands trembled, her eyes distant, fighting back tears. In the corner, Victor turned back, leaning against a shelf. His voice carried just enough to reach them. "You, new guy, don't be like her." He stared straight at Mason, eyes glinting with sick authority. "Work fast, don't think, don't talk." The words fell heavy, shrinking the room. Mason nodded slightly, hiding the fire in his gaze. "Yes, sir." Victor smirked, walked away. Each slow step on the tile echoes like a countdown of humiliation. Maya said nothing. She just shook her head gently, warning him to stay out of it. Then she bent again, mopping the same spotless patch until it shone like glass. Mason watched her, one thought echoing in his mind. This isn't about dirt, it's about control. Every passing minute was a raw lesson in how power can be twisted, how survival can silence truth. He understood then. What needed cleaning wasn't the floor, it was the system itself. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The clock is ticking toward midnight. Mason inhaled deeply, glanced at the time, then at Maya. She kept working, silent, her voice long stolen. Inside him, something flickered to life. A small flame, quiet, but relentless. That night, Mason didn't just mop floors. He was stripping away the illusion of a fair world he once believed in. And in that heavy silence, he knew. Tomorrow, he would go deeper, further, until the truth had nowhere left to hide. When Victor left the work floor, silence swallowed the room. Only the flicker of a tired fluorescent bulb and the slow roll of a mop wheel down the hall. Mason stood by the shelf, eyes fixed on the office door as it closed. His grip tightened on the mop handle, heart pounding inside his chest. Inside that room, he knew the answers were waiting. He moved slowly, his breath mixing with the sharp scent of bleach still hanging in the air. The doorknob felt cold under his hand. A faint click, and the door eased open. The small office glowed with a pale blue light from the computer screen. Everything inside was too neat, unnaturally perfect. Mason stepped in. Each step felt like betrayal of the disguise he wore, of the silence he'd kept. He wasn't a janitor anymore. He was a man searching for the soul his company had lost. The monitor glowed brighter. Rows of names filled the screen. At the top, one line struck him like a punch to the chest. V. Kane Jr. He blinked, looked closer. Work hours stretched across the chart. 40, 42, 44 a week. But he knew there was no such employee. Those hours didn't belong to a person. They belonged to people like Maya. His hands trembled, but he stayed steady. He pulled out his phone, hit record. The screen's blue glow painted his face. Cold, revealing, unflinching. The cursor moved. Beneath the fake name, other names appeared. Maya Rivera, Tommy Park, Chloe Grant. Each is followed by a small red arrow. The command line read, Shift adjustment. Reallocation approved. Mason's breath caught. He understood instantly. Victor was rerouting their hours into ghost accounts, stealing wages in plain sight. Every stolen hour was a piece of someone's life, taken not by knife, but by quiet cruelty. He filmed everything, every cell, every number. His fingers gripped the phone so tightly the knuckles turned white. The mouse clicked again. Another screen loaded. Maya's file, the label full-time employee, shone clearly, then vanished with a few clicks, replaced by temporary part-time. A new line flashed. Health insurance, ineligible. Mason froze. That one click had just erased a child's surgery. A single line of code had stolen a heartbeat waiting to be saved. His voice slipped out, rough, broken. He just stole her child's surgery. The words caught in his throat. Blood rushed in his ears. In front of him weren't numbers anymore. He saw Maya's face in the dim hallway, her trembling voice, her daughter's name. A wave of pain tore through him. Not guilt. Awakening. A faint sound startled him. A door closing somewhere outside. Not Victor. Maya. Collecting trash down the next aisle is unaware. He turned back to the monitor, kept recording. Lines scrolled upward. Data unfolding like a confession. Under budget summary, the last line appeared. Maintenance supplies reduced by 68%. Mason almost laughed, but it came out bitter. He thought of the nearly empty bottle Maya held earlier. Another click. Victor opened employee hours projection, and there it was. A full architecture fraud. Every employee's hours were trimmed just below benefit thresholds. Those who questioned, removed. Those who stayed silent, kept, but slowly starved. A system built from fear. Mason filmed it all. The blue light gleamed in his eyes. Not just anger now, but something reborn. He whispered beneath his breath. No more hiding. Each word carried the weight of a vow. He zoomed in on one line, Maya Rivera, beside the word ineligible. Then he stared at the screen. The man in the reflection wasn't Mike Henderson anymore. He was Mason Reed, the CEO who once believed morality could be written into policy. Tears slid down his cheeks before he even noticed. They didn't fall hard, just traced slow lines across his face, catching the light. That was the moment everything changed. No more hesitation, no more apologies, only justice, to be restored by his own hands. He stopped recording, slipped the phone into his pocket. His father's voice echoed softly in his mind. Sometimes, son, you must become the witness to understand another's pain. Mason looked around the small office, the air thick with sweat and deceit. He stepped out and closed the door gently behind him. But he knew that door would never truly close again. What he'd seen tonight would follow him until every truth was brought to light. Outside, the hum of the air conditioner lingered. The light buzzed faintly overhead, and Mason's heart pounded like thunder in a cage, signaling the beginning of his first confrontation. A man who once ruled from the top, now stepping into the deepest dark to bring back the light for those the world forgot. The sky outside was still pitch black. The first light hadn't touched the ground. When Victor Kane's phone lit up, the clock hands stopped at 5:30. The world was still asleep. His voice broke the silence. Rough, tired, but triumphant. That janitor? Perfect target. Her kid's sick, so she'll take anything. Each word landed like nails hammered into the air. Mason stood in the next room, his back against the thin wall, phone in his hand, already recording. He could hear every breath, every note of arrogance in Victor's tone. Outside the window, dawn was nowhere yet, but inside Mason, the fire was already burning. She's been losing hours, right? A voice asked from the other end, casual, detached. Good, less hours, less benefits. Victor laughed, a low sound thick with smoke and money. Corporate thinks I'm a genius. They'll never know. Mason clenched his jaw, eyes shut tight, fingers gripping the phone until his knuckles turned white. His chest tightened with every word. Through the wall, Victor kept talking. calm, steady, like reading a victory plan. I've got 3 stores under my numbers now, same formula. Trim the weak ones, reward the loyal. Mason froze. Trim the weak ones, cut away the weak. He thought of Maya, her trembling hands on the mop handle last night, her cracked palms, and here, on the other side of this wall, sat a man proud of turning pain into profit. Mason took a slow breath, holding it, forcing his rage to stay silent. He heard the chair creak, fingers tapping the desk. That single mom, she should thank me for not firing her. People like that. They'll crawl to keep a job. Victor's laugh followed, long, cold, crawling through the wall into Mason's chest like a blade. 2 worlds coexisted in that moment. One where power played God, and one where people bent low just to survive. From the storage room came a cough. Harsh, shaking. Maya's cough. She tried to cover her mouth, but the sound slipped through. Small. Pained. That image flashed in Mason's mind, tangled with Victor's laughter, 2 sounds colliding, pain and cruelty. One pleading to live, the other proud to destroy. Each time Maya coughed, Victor laughed again, and Mason, caught between them, could only clench his fists until his body shook. "She'll take any shift I give her," Victor said. "That's the beauty of desperation. It's loyalty that costs nothing." The words hit Mason like a blow. He looked toward the door. The recording light was blinking faintly in his hand. Each second of audio felt like a blade cutting deeper into his soul. A soft noise. The storeroom door opened. Maya stepped out, hand on her chest, breath shallow. The dim light touched her pale face. She glanced around, unaware that just meters away, Mason stood frozen, listening to every insult carved against her life. For a brief moment, 3 lives fit into one unseen frame. Maya is struggling to breathe. Victor, behind his wall of deceit, smiling in the dark. And Mason standing between them, eyes wet, phone steady in hand. "They'll never find out," Victor murmured again, drunk on his own victory. "Corporate loves my numbers. They don't care how I get them." The sentence stretched long, like a confession carved into stone. Mason opened his eyes. No more trembling now. A single tear slipped down, landing on his phone screen. The faint light rippling across the drop. Pain, corruption, and witness, all fused into one. The world seemed to stop. Only the thud of his heartbeat filled the silence. Mason whispered, barely more than breath, "You'll care soon." A promise small in sound, but heavy as truth. Beyond the wall, Victor kept talking, kept laughing, still sure of his throne built on fear. But Mason knew, in just a few hours, every word spoken in this darkness would echo beneath the brightest light. And for the first time, the man who thought he could never be touched would finally have to face the truth. The hallway was empty when Maya stumbled. The mop slipped from her hand. The plastic hit the floor with a dry, hollow sound. She leaned against the wall, one hand clutching for balance, her eyes fading out of focus. Mason caught her just in time, his hand gripping her shoulder before her small frame collapsed. The sting of bleach filled the air. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Hey, Maya, look at me." His voice shook. Gone was the calm mask he'd worn for days. She opened her eyes halfway, a faint smile flickering like mist under the dim light. "I'm fine. I just need to finish my shift." The words came weak, but carried that strange discipline born from too many years of fear. Mason looked at her, and it felt like watching the whole weight of the world pressed into one fragile body. "Maya, when was the last time you saw a doctor?" His voice cracked with restraint. She pressed her lips together, breath uneven, then whispered, "Doctors cost money." 3 short words, sharp enough to pierce through bone. Mason looked around. The fluorescent light above flickered, breaking the world into fragments of shadow and glow. She shook her head, almost ashamed of being seen weak. "I'm okay, really. Just tired." Her words dissolved into the hum of the air conditioner. He helped her down, guiding her to sit against the wall. His hands touched hers. Rough, cracked, cold. The skin was like a map of every hardship she'd carried. He stared at her palms, memorizing every scar, every line. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled, refusing to hold her. The light dimmed even more. Everything slowed. Each breath, each heartbeat, each heavy second. Maya steadied herself on the wall, forcing another step. Her worn shoes slid across the wet floor, leaving a trail of water like the mark of someone walking past her own limits. Mason wanted to stop her, but she shook her head. "If I don't finish, they'll dock me again." The sentence hit him like a blow. She wasn't afraid of pain. She was afraid of losing a few dollars. The dollars that kept her daughter alive. Mason rose slowly, following her, hand hovering close enough to catch her again. She limped forward, light glinting off the sweat on her temple. No sound left, just her fading breath. When she nearly collapsed again, he stepped in, arms catching her, holding tight. And for a moment, the world stopped. She whispered, voice faint as air, "I can't lose this job." Tears burned in Mason's eyes. He wanted to tell her who he was, that she didn't need to be afraid anymore, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not while the system still had her trapped. Instead, he tightened his grip, whispering back softly, "You won't." Streetlight spilled through the glass, brushing her face in pale gold. She smiled weakly, her eyes dimming, and finally closed them. Mason lifted her onto a chair, draped his jacket over her shoulders. The clock near the counter ticked steadily. Each sounds a reminder. Every minute passing was another piece of justice stolen away. He looked at her hands again. The cracks are bleeding slightly, and dust and cleaner are stuck in the wounds. Beneath that skin lay an entire lifetime of endurance. He bowed his head, his voice rough and low. "Tomorrow, I end this." The words left him like a blade cutting through silence. A vow, an ending, and a beginning. He looked toward Victor's closed office door. The light is still on. Evil is still proud of its safety. Just one more day, and Mason would no longer be a witness. He would be the reckoning. Outside, dawn had not yet arrived, but inside Mason, light had already begun to break through. And as it touched his hands, he knew. There was no turning back. The morning was gray, as if even the sky knew what was about to happen. Employees gathered around the inventory counter, white light spilling over tired faces. Victor Kane stood in the center, clipboard in hand, that same cold smile fixed in place. "All right, listen up," he said, voice sharp and high. "Any mistakes in tonight's inventory? We'll deduct wages. No excuses." A soft breath came from the back of the line. Maya kept her head down, hands clasped tight, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. Mason stood among them, quiet, still, watching every bowed head, every heavy sigh. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look up. Victor paused, scanning the crowd. Then he said it, voice smooth as poison. "We're a family here, but only if everyone knows their place." A few dry laughs echoed, metal against stone. Mason inhaled slowly, his palms damp. This was the moment he had prepared for. He stepped forward once, voice calm but clear. "Actually, there's something unfair here." The room froze. Every head turned toward him. Victor squinted, lips curling. "Oh, really? The new guy's got opinions now?" Mason didn't answer. He reached into his pocket, tapped his phone. A single beep. Then Victor's own voice spilled into the air. Cold, smug, unmistakable. "That janitor. Perfect target. Her kid's sick, so she'll take anything." The words sliced through the silence. Everyone froze. Maya looked up, color draining from her face. Tommy turned to Victor, disgust replacing fear. Mason pressed again. Victor's voice returned, slower, prouder, crueler. "Corporate thinks I'm a genius. They'll never know." A ripple of whispers spread, then stopped. The air thickened. Victor stepped back, his face pale. You recorded me?" Mason looked at him, voice steady as the calm before thunder. "I didn't record you." He paused, eyes burning. "You recorded yourself, every time you thought no one was listening." The room went dead still. You could hear the hum of the lights. Mason stepped closer, From his pocket, he drew out a silver badge. The ceiling light caught it, flashing across his face. Victor blinked, stepped back again. "My name's Mason Reed," he said, slow, deliberate. "And this ends now." Gasps rippled through the room. Maya covered her mouth. Tommy dropped his clipboard. No one spoke. Victor froze, then barked a laugh, bitter and cracked. "You think a badge changes anything? You can't do this." Mason's gaze softened. No anger, only pity. "Fraud voids your contract." He said it quietly, but it hit like a verdict. The main doors opened. 2 security officers stepped in, standing silent on either side. Victor looked around, panic rising. "Wait, you don't understand. I did this for the company." Mason shook his head, smiling faintly. Sad, not victorious. "No, you did this for yourself." He turned to the staff. "For months, this man has stolen from you. Your hours, your pay, your dignity. But the worst thing he stole was your belief that this place could be fair." No one moved. Then a young woman behind Maya began to cry. Tommy lowered his head, fists trembling. Mason lifted his phone one last time. The final recording played. "People like her should be grateful for crumbs." Victor's voice filled the room again, this time sounding like a ghost. He staggered back, face white. "That's out of context," he shouted, voice cracking. "I was joking." Mason didn't blink. "Then the joke ends here." He turned to the guards, nodding once. Victor tried to protest, but no one moved to help him. No one obeyed his voice anymore. The man who ruled by fear now stood alone in it. The glass door hissed as it opened. His footsteps dragged, then vanished. The door closed. Silence fell. Mason exhaled slowly, scanning the faces around him. Light streamed through the window. It touched the faces of people who had just watched justice speak out loud. "This isn't about revenge," he said softly. "It's about rebuilding what's right." Maya stood motionless, tears spilling over her hands. Tommy stepped forward, placing a hand on Mason's shoulder. No words, only gratitude. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Another followed. The sound spread. Quiet. Real. Alive. Applause and sighs filled the air. Not for triumph, but for release. Mason looked at them, nodding gently. "From now on, no more crumbs." His voice was low, but every word hung in the air like a promise. Shock, silence, justice, 3 beats of an ending, and the birth of something new. And in that moment, everyone understood. What they had just witnessed wasn't just exposure. It was the rebirth of a faith they thought was lost. The morning that followed felt heavy, as if the sky itself remembered what had happened. Sunlight slid quietly through the glass, spilling across desks that still smelled of tension. A car stopped outside. From it stepped Dana Brooks, Senior Director of Human Resources. Her eyes were steady, each stride cutting through the dense air like a blade. No more Victor, no more shouting, only people standing still, waiting to see what would rise after the storm. Dana set a stack of files on the counter, flipping them open one by one. Her gaze moved across the papers. Every note, every red mark. Mason stood nearby, silent. The anger was gone now, replaced by resolve. "We're cross-checking every hour, every payslip," Dana said, her voice firm, cold, and clear. "If you've been cheated, you'll get it back." A faint breeze passed through the room, carrying with it the sound of truth returning. Tommy stood at the back, clutching his pay sheet. Maya beside him, still uncertain, eyes rimmed red. Dana reached the last folder, her tone softened. "Maya Rivera," she read. "You're owed $14,847. Time stopped. Maya blinked as if her ears had betrayed her. "What? What did you say?" Dana smiled gently. "Every stolen hour, every shift you worked and never got paid. We calculated it all. It's yours." Maya's hand rose to her mouth. Tears poured before she could stop them. Her body trembled, sobs caught between disbelief and release. Mason stepped forward, catching her as her knees gave way. "It's okay," he whispered. "You earned every cent." Maya nodded, crying and laughing all at once. The tears now were no longer pain. They were freedom. Dana continued reading. one name after another. Chloe Grant. Full maternity leave approved. Paid in full. Chloe stood in the corner, hand over her belly, eyes wet. "Thank you," she whispered. Dana looked up, smiled faintly. "No. Thank you for staying strong." Tommy's name came next. Tommy Park, promoted to assistant manager, effective immediately. He turned toward Mason, eyes wide. Mason nodded, smiling softly. "You earned it, kid." Tommy swallowed hard. "I just did what was right." "Exactly," Mason said. "That's all it ever takes." The air in the store changed. No fear. No lowered heads. People stood taller, saw one another as a team for the first time. Dana closed the folder, glancing around. "All employees will have full insurance reinstated, and we're launching an employee council. Any complaint goes directly to my office. No more middlemen." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing. Rolling through the room, Mason looked around. Light from the windows touched every face, faces that had been silent, now reclaiming their voice. He stepped forward, voice low and steady. "This company was built on trust," he said. "Somewhere along the way, we lost it. But today, we start again." He paused, meeting the eyes of Maya, Tommy, and Chloe. "If anyone ever hurts you again," he spoke slowly, clearly, "you call me." The words hung in the air like a vow. The room went still for a heartbeat. Then a wave of relief rippled through it, like chains falling away. Maya looked at him, eyes bright in the new light. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Mason shook his head. "You don't thank me. You keep standing tall." She nodded, tears falling again. Light now, almost joyful. Tommy turned to the younger crew, his voice stronger than usual. "Guess we clean the place for real now." Laughter broke out, soft at first, then full, warm, alive. The first true laughter in months. Sunlight poured through the windows, stretching long across the spotless floor. Mason stood still, listening to the sound. He understood now. Justice wasn't about punishment. It was about giving back dignity. As Dana walked to the door, she stopped, looking back at him. "You did the right thing, Mason," she said quietly. He met her eyes, calm, certain. "No, they did." Dana nodded, smiling before she left. Mason turned back. Maya was talking with her team, her hands no longer trembling, and in their faces he saw something he thought the company had lost forever: hope. He took a deep breath. For the first time in years, it felt light. When he glanced at the watch on his wrist, he smiled faintly. Time had never stopped, but today, he knew. It had finally started again. 3 weeks passed, and no one recognized the place anymore. The store that once felt heavy now shone bright, as if morning sunlight had swept away every shadow that lingered in the air. Laughter drifted from the break room, clear and real enough to make anyone passing by smile. No more rushed footsteps, no more eyes cast down. Everyone moved like they were returning to themselves. On the wall hung a large photo. The whole team at the weekend picnic. Maya in the center, smiling widely, her eyes lit with belief. A crisp white shirt, a new name tag catching the light on her chest. Store manager Maya Rivera. She stepped out from the break room, holding a cup of hot coffee, greeting each person with a gentle smile. "Morning, everyone." Voices answered back. Natural, fearless. Mason stood near the counter, looking around. Everything small, yet different. The schedule board was neatly arranged. No red slashes, no sudden changes. Every shift balanced, every break real. On the break room wall, a new sign was written by hand. "Speak freely. We listen." He walked slowly, hand brushing the edge of a table, eyes tracing every detail. Tommy was training a new hire on safety rules, his voice confident, relaxed. Chloe sat near the phone, laughing softly as she talked about her baby on the way, eyes bright with peace. The air itself felt reborn. No music needed, just the sound of people being human again. Maya spotted Mason, walked over with that same calm warmth. "Didn't expect you to visit this early." He smiled, eyes soft, couldn't stay away. She laughed quietly, looked around, then said slowly, firm and honest, "We're not afraid anymore."
The words floated gently but deep, a closing note to one era and the first line of another. Mason nodded, pride glinting in his eyes. "Good," he said softly. "Fear kills companies." Maya smiled again, and somehow that smile made the whole room brighter. Someone brought pastries to the table. Laughter rose again. An email pinged on the office screen. Dana's thank you message to the team. Subject line, "Read values in action." Mason saw the words, shook his head, smiling faintly. He didn't need his name on the door anymore. What mattered was that the people inside were living the values he once dreamed about. A young intern passed by. Bowing politely, Maya laid a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "Take your time. Do it right, not fast." The same words Mason had once said to her on a rainy night long ago. The circle was complete. Not an ending. A beginning. Mason stood still, looking through the glass. Morning light spilled in, spreading across the polished floor. Dust glimmered like tiny fragments of hope floating upward. Laughter, conversation, the soft rhythm of keyboards, all in harmony now. No one mentioned Victor. No one looked back. They simply worked. Peacefully, freely. Maya turned once more, meeting Mason's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, barely above breath. He answered with a quiet smile. No words needed. Sunlight poured through the wide glass pane, wrapping them both in gold. Gratitude, trust, and stillness merging into one new beginning. He looked at his watch, then around the room. Nothing left to fix. Just the work of keeping this place clean. Not just on the floor, but in the heart. The light outside hit the sign above the door where someone had written in chalk, "Trust begins here." Mason read it softly, his lips barely moving. Yes, it does. And as he stepped outside, the door swung open. Morning wind rushing in, cool and clear like a blessing. Inside, laughter continued, blending with sunlight breaking across the tiles. Peace had truly returned. Golden light poured across the grand hall. Hundreds of people sat still, waiting for the man they had only ever seen in headlines. Mason Reed stood center stage. Black suit, simple tie. Behind him, the screen glowed with numbers. Profits, market share, growth charts. He looked up, voice calm and steady. Leadership isn't about profit. He paused. It's about listening. The room fell silent. He clicked the remote. On the screen appeared Maya on her first day. Wrinkled uniform, frightened eyes, name tag fallen on the bathroom floor. A few whispers rippled through the crowd, then stopped as the next image appeared. Maya today. Crisp white shirt, standing proudly among her team, smiling beneath a banner that read, "Best Place to Work. Employee Choice Award." Mason looked at the photo for a long moment. "This is Maya Rivera," he said. 3 months ago, she was a janitor crying in a bathroom. Today, she's one of the best store managers in our company. Hundreds of eyes lifted toward the screen. That picture wasn't just of one woman. It was proof of real change. In the front row, Maya sat quietly, her hands trembling as tears shimmered in the light. She couldn't hide her smile. Beside her, little Sophia tilted her head. "Mommy, that's you." Maya nodded softly. "That's us." Mason continued, his voice deepening, carrying weight. "When I started Thompson Stores, I thought success was measured in numbers. But then I heard someone crying in a bathroom, and I realized the real profit is people." The next slide appeared. A team photo of the rebuilt store. Tommy is beaming with his new assistant manager badge. Chloe is holding her newborn baby. And Maya in the middle, light shining across her face. "We rebuilt not just a store," Mason said. "We rebuilt trust." The next slide showed a bold new logo, Worker Verified Fair Employment Certified. The words glowed across the screen, and the hall seemed to brighten with them. Mason scanned the audience, voice quieter now, but more powerful than ever. "This isn't a slogan, it's a system built by those who suffered under silence. They are the real architects of this change." People lowered their eyes.
some out of shame, some out of understanding. Maya wiped her tears, her smile still trembling. Sophia swung her legs from the chair, her hair catching the light. "He's talking about you, Mommy," the little girl whispered. Maya shook her head gently. "No, baby. He's talking about all of us." The final slide appeared. A video played. Sophia running across a green field, her tiny hands holding up a kite. Her laughter filled the speakers, light and boundless. Mason's voice played softly beneath the image. That little girl once almost lost her chance at life because a system failed her mother. Today she runs free. That's what leadership is supposed to do. Give people room to breathe, to live, to dream. The hall stayed silent. Only Sophia's laughter filled the space. In the final frame, she fell into the grass, laughing, then stood up and ran again. The image froze there. A small child, happy, under an endless sky. Mason stepped forward, eyes bright beneath the lights. "Our company now carries a title I never dreamed of," he said. "Not most profitable retailer, but worker-verified fair employment. The first in the nation." He took a breath. "And starting today, I invite every CEO in this room to sign this pledge." Behind him, a large digital board lit up with 6 words: "We commit to listen." In the front rows, the first executive stood, then another, then an entire row. The sound of pens signing began. Soft, steady like a shared heartbeat. Applause broke from the back, spreading forward until the whole hall rose to its feet. Maya stood, holding Sophia close. Tears streamed down, but her smile never broke. Mason looked toward her, and their eyes met. No words, just understanding. He smiled faintly, voice low but clear. "We changed one store, and it changed everything." The screen behind him filled with the final image. Maya holding the best place to work plaque, sunlight glinting off her smile. Her co-workers are cheering beside her. Sophia wraps her arms around her from behind, laughing into her mother's shoulder. The applause grew louder. People stood, some wiping tears, others smiling through them. Mason took a slow breath, looking out at the sea of faces. He knew this wasn't glory. It was a reminder that real power doesn't shout, it listens. The clapping continued, echoing the heartbeat of every worker once forgotten, now seen again. White light flooded the stage, reflecting across his face, the words behind him shining bright, leadership rewritten. And in that moment, Mason whispered, only to himself, "This is what leadership should feel like." In the front row, Maya leaned down and kissed Sophia's forehead. The little girl giggled, her laughter rising like sunlight through the hall. A new era had begun, not built on power, but on humanity. This morning, the city felt unusually quiet. Sunlight slipped through the windows, touching the glass as if whispering a new beginning. Mason held his phone, his voice calm and low. "Maya, how's Sophia?" A soft pause. Then Maya's voice came, warm and gentle. "Perfect. She calls you the man who saved her mom." Mason smiled faintly, his words slow and sincere. "No, she saved us all." On the other end, Maya stayed silent for a moment, then whispered, "We'll never forget what you did." Mason replied quietly, "Just promise me one thing. Keep listening." The call ended, but her voice lingered in his mind, a soft echo reminding him what truly mattered. He looked outside, where the city was waking up. Each person carries a story no one else might know. The narrator's voice rose, calm, steady, reflective. The person crying in the restroom might be in your company right now. A long pause followed, as if inviting every heart to listen inward. The question is, will you hear them? And will you act? Every silence carries meaning, if we're willing to listen. And when the world grows too loud with numbers, sometimes all it takes is one person who stops to ask who's hurting beside them. If stories like this moved you, subscribe, share, and help build a world where leadership means understanding people, one story at a time, one heart each day. Some stories make us fall silent, not because there are no words left, but because the heart is learning to understand. The story of Mason, of Maya, of Sophia is more than a miracle at work. It's a mirror for all of us. If one person with power stops to listen, countless other voices will be heard. If one person dares to act against injustice, the world softens, even just a little. Justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins in a heart that trembles at someone else's pain. Leadership doesn't begin with a business card. It begins in that quiet moment when we ask, "Are you okay?" Maybe right now someone is crying behind a door where you work. Maybe all they need is one person who cares, one person who listens. If this story touched you, start with something small, a question, a gesture, a bit of fairness. And if you believe the world needs more stories like this, subscribe, share this video, and let's build a world where leadership means understanding people, one story at a time, one heart at a time.